Hey, what's going on? So we talked about all of these things in class, but I wanted to make a video just in case you weren't in class or you wanted to watch it again. So we're not going over the entire Cold War. In fact, I've had a couple questions about how did the Cold War start? Well, for us to talk about that, we have to go into a little bit of like World War II and at the end. So I don't want to make it too complicated. I want to just give you the basics of the Cold War. There's a lot of noise in the hall. Hopefully that's not affecting what I'm saying. But I want to talk about three things. The domino effect, mutually assured destruction, or MAD, and then a little bit about the Cuban Missile Crisis. So the first thing I want to talk about, and hopefully this is review, is the domino effect. And right up here, I'll probably put a picture of dominoes. And maybe you've seen those videos where people will set up dominoes and then knock them down. Well, the US was worried about if communism would start in a country like Vietnam and communism took over, if that country fell to communism, then its neighbors might do the same thing. So that's why the US went into Vietnam to try to keep it a capitalist country. And they were worried if the Soviets and the Chinese, if their influence in North Vietnam would trickle down to the South Vietnam, then it might also spread to Laos and Cambodia, some of the countries that border Vietnam, which is why the US got involved in a few hot wars during the Cold War. Now, one reason that maybe the Soviet Union and the US never used nuclear weapons on each other was because of this thing. It's an acronym, MAD, mutually assured destruction. Mutual, meaning that the feelings are the same. So if you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, maybe you're too young for that, hopefully you're too young for that, hopefully you have a mutual respect, a mutual love for each other. Hopefully you see that people in your life, if they are friendly, if they're friends, then they have a mutual liking for each other. It's equal. Assured means it's definitely going to happen. Without a doubt, it's going to happen. And destruction, right? Most people know destruction. Mutually assured destruction. Because the US and the Soviets both had nuclear weapons, they should be worried that if the US launches nuclear weapons at the Soviets, well, they'll know that's happening and they will do the same. They will launch their weapons at the US. So what you have is a back and forth of weapons, kind of like a tennis game, back and forth with nuclear weapons, and that's not the type of tennis game you want, because that will lead to mutually assured destruction. Both countries, and probably the entire world, will be destroyed. We're not going to talk about nuclear winter here, but if you want to look up nuclear winter, if there are enough bombs, the bombs don't actually have to land on your country to devastate the world. So it's kind of scary. Maybe you don't want to look it up. The next thing I want to talk about is the Cuban Missile Crisis. So we're talking early 60s. We're talking President Kennedy. Okay, he will eventually get assassinated in 1963. But in the early 60s, in the video you watched, there was this thing called the Bay of Pigs. I'm not going to get into that in this video here, but I do want to talk about something that happened after the Bay of Pigs, but before Kennedy's assassination, and that's the Cuban Missile Crisis. So for years, the US had nuclear weapons in this country called Turkey. I'll probably put a map right up there of Turkey, really close to the Soviet Union. Nowadays, it's like Russia, Georgia. I know Georgia's a US state, but it's also a country in Europe. No, actually maybe Asia, but it is Asia, but it was part of the Soviet Union. So you have Turkey, US has weapons there. The Soviets were like, our bombs aren't powerful enough to reach the United States, but we have a friend in Cuba, Fidel Castro, and he might let us put nuclear weapons there, and then we could hit the United States capital, Washington, D.C., from Cuba. And that's what they started to try to do. So nuclear weapons were being delivered, but the launchers, they were actually already in Cuba, and the US had some spy planes flying over, and they showed President Kennedy those pictures, and Kennedy was like, yeah, that's not cool. We got to do something about that. And so Khrushchev is the Soviet premier at the time, Khrushchev. And there was, like, we almost went to nuclear war with the Soviet Union. We saw eye to eye, they sometimes say, and we're staring each other down. And so obviously both countries didn't want this to turn into a nuclear war because of that mad thing, mutually assured destruction. So I'm not sure exactly who contacted who first. I believe it was the US. And they said, hey, you got to get your weapons out of Cuba. And they were like, I don't think so. They're like, well, what can we do to help you make that decision? We don't want war. We don't want war either. They didn't say this out loud. But basically, Khrushchev told Kennedy, if you promise never to attack Cuba, we will move our weapons out. And President Kennedy's brother, Robert Kennedy, was Attorney General at the time, and they thought that was a great idea. And they were about to hit reply, not on an email, but on a telegraph kind of system, which takes a little longer than email, when another telegram came in. And that telegram said, you also have to remove your nuclear weapons from Turkey, then we'll remove ours. And so Robert Kennedy, unfortunately, he would be assassinated later in 1968, said, why don't we just respond to the first one? What if we say we'll never invade Cuba? Do you think that will work? Kennedy was like, it won't hurt, so let's try it. And so that's what they did. They sent back a telegram saying, okay, we promise we'll never invade Cuba, and then waited. And then Khrushchev came back and said, all right, deal. We'll start pulling our weapons out. So the US was able to keep their weapons in Turkey as long as they promised never to invade Cuba. Again, if you want to do a little more research on the Bay of Pigs, it's kind of like the US tried to invade Cuba and failed miserably. That was during Kennedy's first few months in office back in 1960. But we're not going to go into Cuban Missile Crisis today. I only wanted to talk about the domino effect, mutually assured destruction, and the Cuban Missile Crisis. I think I did that. So if you have any questions, of course, get with me on email, get with me in the Zoom chat. You know the drill. All right, see you later.